Some amazing programs at community college. We have some great programs at King's Tech, Mr. Speaker. We'll continue to build on those programs to ensure that all needs of all Nova Scotians are met.
Honourable Member for Annapolis on your final supplementary.
I think that is a no. Mr. Speaker, this government doesn't have a solid track record when it comes to this issue. Earlier this year, the Community Services Committee held a forum on poverty, a forum which government representatives chose not to attend, where presenters expressed that the two-year policy needs to be changed. So my question is, will this minister at least review the evidence in a research paper produced by the Changes Coalition and the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives with respect to the importance of a 4-year university program for single parents on social assistance?
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for the opportunity to correct the record. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague to my left here, the Minister of Environment and Labour, was at the poverty session and did take part and took very seriously the issues that were brought to the table, Mr. Speaker. Now, and Mr. Speaker, as a final comment on the issue, poverty is an extremely complex issue, and certainly as we move forward in the days to come, all programs will be reviewed to ensure that we are meeting the needs of all Nova Scotians, low income, as well as men and women, Mr. Speaker, across the province. Thank you.
The honourable member for Pictou East.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Natural Resources. I would like to talk about an instance of discrimination that is taking place in this minister's department in regards to seasonal employees. Mr. Speaker, seasonal employees work from 3 to 9 months every year, and there are many that have done this for 30 years without a guarantee of being rehired. No benefits, no protections, and no wage parity for doing the same job. The problem, Mr. Speaker, is that they are not allowed to unionize. Will this minister please explain why these workers are ineligible to be protected by a union?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member opposite for the question. I was made aware that there was an interest out there amongst the seasonal workers during the election campaign to make this an issue. I'm advised that there's currently no accommodation for them under the Trade Union Act and the applicable labor laws, and that is something that would have to be addressed there to give that consideration.
The honourable member for Pictou East on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, an election issue. Mr. Speaker, more than 70% of the 350 seasonal DNR staff signed union cards last summer, Mr. Speaker, showing their desire for union representation last summer. This government continues to drag its feet on the issue. Mr. Speaker, there are other seasonal staff within the provincial government who enjoy the protections offered by a union. Why are these employees not offered the same opportunity?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, Mr. Speaker, what I was told when I asked the question is I was not aware that there was any capacity for them to be able to unionize, but I will take it under advisement and give it the appropriate consideration.
The honourable member for Pictou East on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is just a matter of rights and who is allowed to unionize and who isn't. The minister should take a long look at this situation, seek the needed information, the correct information, on how he can get this done, and do it. My final question is, when will this minister do the right thing and give these workers the fairness that they deserve?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member opposite again for his question, and I think as I answered in the initial question, the first supplementary, I'm not aware that the capacity is there, but I will take it under advisement and give it the appropriate consideration.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question today is for the Minister of Health. I'll table pages from the April Capital Health Operational Measures Report. The documents detail the wait times for elective CT scans. It says, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, "In the future, it is anticipated that both the QE2 and the Dartmouth wait times will decrease with the new CT scanner at the Cobequid." So my question to the Minister of Health today, Mr. Speaker, given this example of the impact the Cobequid CT scanner is having on wait times, why not add the resources to the capital health budget so its hours can be extended?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it's a situation that we continually to strive forward on making sure that we have the correct equipment in the correct areas of all the province, making sure that we have the professionals to man them. And we've taken serious consideration and request from CDHA to rectify this issue and make sure that the wait times are an acceptable level.
Honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, a year ago, the wait times for elective CT scan was 112 days at the QE2. That's 4 times the targeted wait days for elective CT scan, Mr. Speaker. The wait times at Dartmouth General was 80 days. Wait times at the QE2 now are half that, and the Dartmouth General's wait times are improving every day, Mr. Speaker. Given the long wait times at the emergency rooms in Capital Health, having a 24-hour, 7-days-a-week operation at the Cobequid makes sense, Mr. Speaker. I asked the Minister of Health, when can the residents of the Cobequid Health Region expect around-the-clock access to emergency care so the Cobequid Centre can play an even greater role in addressing the excessive wait times seen in the emergency rooms around HRM, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And we're very proud of the Cobequid Health Centre and what the service that it does provide to the citizens of that area. And as the member opposite has toured the area and checked out the facility, it is absolutely state of the art. During the construction phase, during the planning phase, it was, of course, was only designed to be a part-time ER closing at 11 p.m. It is something we will continue to monitor, but at this time we feel that service is more than adequate with the other facilities in HRM.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And actually, the facility closes at 10 p.m. Mr. Speaker, the new centre is a great facility, as the Minister has stated, and the new services will be greatly used and appreciated by the community when they are finally up and running. But one of the essential needs is around-the-clock access to emergency treatment without having to go to Dartmouth, Halifax, or Windsor, Mr. Speaker. So I ask the Minister of Health again, Mr. Speaker, when will the Capital Health get the resources it needs to provide this essential service at the Cobequid Centre?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the member opposite, to make him understand that the DHAs, of course, have a business plan. They bring things forward to us and make requests for those types of services. And as of yet, the DHA has not brought a request for us to continue or to have 24-hour service at the Cobequid Health Centre.
The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my question is for the Minister of Justice. Nova Scotians are disturbed at the rise of violent crime in many parts of the province. Such a rise that the capital of our province has in fact become the violent crime capital of the country. In my part of the regional municipality, a series of violent incidents has left many community members on edge. A rash of shootings, murder, fire bombings, and a full-scale manhunt have characterized the last couple of weeks and shaken the faith of local residents in the safety of our province. These are not isolated acts or random violence. There is, in fact, increasing evidence of gang involvement in many of these incidents. So I'd like to ask the Minister what steps the government is taking to deal with gang violence in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the member opposite, thank you for the question. She brings before this House a very serious issue and something that I personally have taken a real interest in resolving. There are many initiatives this government is undertaking, whether it's legislation, programs, meeting with federal ministers, meeting with the local police, meeting with the local HRM police, especially to talk about programs and how we can assist. And I can tell you that I just recently announced a task force on crime, which I believe will talk about issues that you're talking about before the House today. And tell the member opposite that we will do everything we possibly can within this government to support our professional police officers in this province to deal with major crime in Nova Scotia.
Honourable member for Halifax Atlantic on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The trouble is these resources need to be not only dedicated but coordinated. The subject of that full-scale manhunt was actually in police custody in Digby, while Halifax Regional Municipality Police were actually looking for him. It really is essential that the conversations take place amongst forces as well as amongst levels of government. Will the minister tell this House just how there could have been such a massive lack of communication between two police forces in the province?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the member opposite. Member opposite would know that that person that was taken into custody down the Digby area gave a false identification. But I can tell the member opposite that I rely very heavily and believe in the professional police officers of the province of Nova Scotia. They do a good job, and it doesn't do them any service to stay in this House and criticize them. I think all members should rethink their position on this issue.
The Honourable member for Halifax Atlantic on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too have great faith in the individual police officers of the province. However, it is, in fact, the coordination and the organization of those individual police members and their forces, which is essential. Other provinces have managed to deal with this problem. Manitoba, British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, Alberta all have integrated gang units which bring together police, crown attorneys, and other officials so that the resources can really be effectively marshaled. To the Minister, when will your government in fact support the establishment of an integrated unit to deal with the emerging problem of gang violence, specifically in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the member opposite. On behalf of the police of this province, I'll accept that apology. The member just offered. You should, and you should, so you should. You should. The honourable member would know.
Order. Order. Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Justice has the floor. Order.
Integrated gang warfare.
The official
Honourable
However, Mr. Speaker,
the Minister of Justice has the floor.
the police officers.
The members in this House will order. The Honourable Minister of Justice has the floor.
The police officers in this province, municipal, provincial, and federal, are professional people. They deserve the respect of the members of this House and all Nova Scotians. This government has committed $6 million last year in regards to criminal intelligence in this province, which is working very well with municipal and provincial forces. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that we have initiatives underway right now that I'm embarking upon that will assist police in this province, and I believe, as a result of my discussions with them, that they accept that very well. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Digby-Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Tourism. The answers I heard yesterday from the ministers and the Premier showed me they may not understand the importance of the Digby Ferry to our local area. The tourism industry in this province, and specifically in my area, is declining very fast, Mr. Speaker. There's a reason why it's declining so fast, and it's because the government may not be addressing the issues properly, such as the Digby Ferry closure. Without a solution to this problem, our industry is only going to get worse. My question, Minister, will you commit today to providing a solution to the people of this province that would see our ferry back up and running for the good of all Nova Scotians' businesses?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the question. I have some good news, some cautiously optimistic news that the numbers within the tourist industry for this year, as of May, are up, which is good news for this province. Good minister. we have, Mr. Speaker, as well, through the budget of the tourism department, have also increased the budget in the marketing division to attract our friends from the U.S. and from other parts of Canada by over $600,000 this year. Mr. Speaker, also, as is an initiative this evening, through the Minister of Economic Development, Minister Hurlbert, we will be this evening meeting with MLAs, with the municipal officials from the Digby area, and possibly, Mr. Speaker, if I could maybe pass part of the question over to the Minister of Economic Development for comment.
Just order. I would just remind the honourable member that you do not refer to a member by their name but by their title. It's just, but the honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tourism marketing plans are great, but shouldn't Digby Ferry and other transportation be a huge part of getting more people to this province? How will we ever double tourism without transportation systems to bring them here? Over 100,000 individuals, mainly tourists, use this ferry service each year to come to our province, to come to our attractions, sleep at our bed and breakfasts. The easier you make it for them to come, the more that will come. My question is, Minister, how are you going to double the tourism industry if you refuse to address the issues such as the closure of our ferry? Just what is the tourism plan to bring double the people here to this province?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I guess, in fairness with my last comment, I guess maybe the honourable member may not have been listening to what I was just saying. We are, as a government, increasing our tourism budget to draw and to market the province and its resources to other parts of Canada and the United States. We are as well with regard to the issue of the ferry. Our government takes the issue of the Digby Ferry extremely seriously. The meeting that we are convening this evening hopefully will help to deal and resolve that issue, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Economic Development Minister. The people feel that this government and your department may be giving up on Western Nova Scotia and this province by allowing this ferry to close and allowing companies such as Shaw Wood and Weymouth Sawmill to close as well. The Digby Ferry closure, the closure of Shaw Wood, the Weymouth Sawmill will account for over 400 jobs lost in my area this past year alone. Mr. Speaker, my question is, this government subsidizes many companies in this province. Are you still saying you refuse to provide assistance to companies in Digby County?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. I can assure that member and all members of the House that the Premier of the Province of Nova Scotia, the Minister of Transportation and Public Works, and myself met with our federal minister yesterday at One Government Place on this issue, and I can assure the member that we're going to be meeting with the Minister Cannon in Ottawa onto this issue, and we're going to be talking to representatives from the communities on both sides of the harbour to make sure that there's a resolution. We will find a resolution, and we will do what we can to maintain that service.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. The Glades Lodge is a long-term care facility in my constituency with a license for 123 beds. It was built in 1962. A study commissioned last year by the Department of Health itself showed that all the mechanical systems in the building are past their useful lives. The list of renovations listed as must-do is lengthy and expensive. The list of renovations listed as should-do runs into the millions of dollars, Mr. Speaker, and is very long. And yet, the Department of Health has shown only a deafening silence in response to repeated requests from the owners for some information, some news about what the Department of Health has in mind for the future of the Glades Lodge. My question for the Minister, when will the Minister of Health deal with the concerns of residents, their families, the staff, and the owners, and give some indication of what the Department of Health plan is for the future of the Glades Lodge?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the member opposite. I thank him for the question because it is important, and it is an issue that we see right across this province of aging long-term care facilities, and is why we wanted to have a comprehensive continuing care strategy, why within that continuing care strategy we talk about home care entitlements and making sure that we keep people in their homes as long as possible, but also looking at the creation of new beds within the system, of course talking about the 826 beds in the first 4 years, and also talking about replacement. Glade Lodge, of course, as the member opposite so eloquently talked about, does have mechanicals problems, does have a building problem, as it has been around for such a long time. And I would hope, and in the near future, we'll be talking about a replacement for that facility.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
The time to do something, Minister, is now.
Order, please. The time allotted for question period has expired. The Honourable Member for Annapolis on an introduction.
I want to draw the attention of the hosts to the West Gallery. The mayors and wardens of Digby and Annapolis County are here, as was stated earlier in question period, to participate in a meeting tonight to help find a solution to the loss of the Scotia Prince. I'd like to introduce them by name. The mayor of the most romantic town in Canada, Frank McIntosh. The mayor of the most livable small town in North America, John Kinsella. The warden of Digby County, Jim Thurber. The warden of Annapolis County, Peter Newton. And the mayor of Bridgetown, Ron Gullen. I'd ask the host to give them a warm reception.
We indeed like to welcome our guests to the House today and in the gallery. Opposition members' business. The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you please call resolution number 21?
Resolution number 21. The Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome the opportunity to discuss this resolution in this assembly. It's a very important issue to voters in Halifax Citadel and in communities all over North America. As I understand it, 11 schools are destined for closure this year, and 4 in Halifax Citadel that I'd like to speak about in particular. With your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to read the resolution. Whereas the community of Halifax Citadel has been well served by our neighborhood schools, and whereas the province has agreed to spend $10 million to construct one large elementary school with over 700 students in the south end of Halifax to replace 4 existing elementary schools, and whereas a move to large big box schools will be bad for students and bad for the communities that will lose their schools, therefore be it resolved that the government will not close 4 elementary schools in Halifax Citadel, but will implement a 2-year moratorium on school closures, undertake meaningful community consultation, and establish a committee to review the role of public schools in their communities. Mr. Speaker, last fall, this government, without any consultation and over the objections of the local school board representative, decided to close 4 neighborhood schools in Halifax Citadel: St. Mary's School, English Street School, Lamarche St. Thomas School, and the Beaufort Annex, and decided to replace those 4 elementary schools with one big box school of over 700 students between the ages of 5 and 11 years old. It appears, Mr. Speaker, that the Minister of Education has established a policy that makes it easier to destroy elementary schools rather than to build them up and fix them and reuse them. Mr. Speaker, these schools form the heart of the communities. Many people have moved around these 4 communities. Young families have moved in, and businesses and groups have formed around these schools. These schools form the fabric that binds these communities together. Taking away these schools will destroy these communities. The big box schools will be bad for students and will devastate the community. It's a Walmart approach to elementary schooling, Mr. Speaker. We have lots of studies that show that big box schools, students in big box schools, are less connected to their communities and their school. They're less fit because they cannot walk or bike, and they're usually bused. They have less access to after-school programs. and they face more challenges with violence and drugs and discipline. Mr. Speaker, the community was surprised to hear that the decision had been made. In fact, when I announced it in the middle of the campaign, the Conservative candidate who had consulted with the Minister of Education was surprised. In fact, he said if such a policy was adopted, he would fight it. And he was surprised to find that, in fact, the policy was adopted and a decision had already been made. There was no consultation and there was no warning, Mr. Speaker. When we heard about this decision, we called for a moratorium. And in typical government fashion, the minister ridiculed it. He said his hands were tied. And then later on, he went on to adopt it. And later on, during the election, he claimed that it was his own idea. And he also suspended the review during the campaign when it became difficult for him to support his government's policy. Mr. Speaker, we called for a moratorium because we want a more inclusive and transparent process. The community needs to participate in this process. We also want to review the criteria for closing schools. Community schools serve a broader purpose. We should take into consideration the services provided by these schools, the recreational and fitness opportunities, language training, youth drop-in centers, after-school care, job retraining, and numerous other opportunities that these small schools offer their communities. And we should consider the potential uses of these schools. I talked with seniors at McKean Manor and Joe Howe Manor, for example, just recently, and they said they don't have any fitness facilities. They would like a place to go and just get together and keep fit and keep their minds and bodies active. Artists at the Khyber Arts Society have said that they don't have space to incubate their talents, to display their talents. We need spaces for new and emerging artists. We need childcare space. Special needs programs are being cut for lack of space. We need programs for at-risk groups. These schools have a number of potential uses, and prior to being closed, we've asked the minister to consult with community groups and conduct a broader review of the purposes that these schools serve and the purposes that they can serve. In short, we are calling for a moratorium to give students and their families and community groups a meaningful role and a transparent process. We would also like the government to consult with other departments and agencies and community service groups, health promotion, for example. This issue, Mr. Speaker, is far too important to be left to an arbitrary process without any consultation. Families in Halifax Citadel are calling on the minister to impose this moratorium. In fact, there's almost unanimous consent in Halifax Citadel for the government to embark on this on an open review. The minister announced that he would, in fact, conduct a review, but did not agree to a moratorium. And presumably, the review now that the election has passed, the review is underway. And the schools have closed for the summer, and families have adjourned for the summer. And this review is underway, and no one in the community seems to know who's on the committee or what the review is looking at or what its terms of reference is. So, Mr. Speaker, we're calling on the minister to impose a moratorium on small school closures. We're calling on them to develop a meaningful and inclusive and transparent review process. We're asking for them to conduct a broader review of the criteria under which schools can be closed. And we're asking them to investigate more the potential uses of these schools, especially for community services purposes, before these schools can be closed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Honourable Member from Halifax Citadel for giving me a chance to share with him the details regarding school review processes, consultations, and what this government is doing to revitalize school and infrastructure across the province. This government is investing more than $400 million over 8 years to build new schools and support extensive renovations work. We are making this investment even at a time when declining student enrollment is declining. And to put it simply, we're building and renovating schools to provide students with a safer and more healthier learning environment. We are replacing schools that are past their useful lives, according to the school boards that manage them and the school communities that use them. and we are renovating schools to extend their useful life where this is more appropriate. The member may or may not know that before entering public life, I was a school administrator, principal of North River Elementary School, and an assistant superintendent of schools. I was also closely involved with communities in site selection for new schools, facilitator of school steering teams, and that team is the one, through public consultation, sits in an advisory capacity to plan and design schools. So I'm very aware of the process. There are beautiful new schools, and they are much loved by the schools that we serve, and they have been involved in consultations with school communities. The leadership and cooperation between and among parents, teachers, and school principals has been exceptional in all of those school steering team reviews. The process for choosing capital projects is important to understand, and capital projects are based on priorities that are identified by school boards, not the minister and not the Department of Education and not the province of Nova Scotia. The School Capital Construction Committee includes representatives from several government departments, and the committee also includes representatives from Nova Scotia School Boards Association. And only through this level of involvement can the members of the School Capital Construction Committee prioritize projects that have been presented to them. And as a result of that process, we have a solid, fiscally responsible, long-term plan to fund education's capital projects. Quite often, the community will identify elements of a project that are good for the community, but not necessarily for the delivery of public school program. And it might be meeting some community activities, such as an enhanced gymnasium or auditorium facilities. In these situations, the government works with school communities to make these things happen. They piggyback on the construction work that is underway, and they fundraise. This is good for communities. This opportunity has translated into many communities now having their new school, as well as enhanced community facilities such as presentation theaters, cafetoriums, libraries, and other outdoor recreational facilities. At the end of the day, the community has a new recreational facility, and all of the cost is far below what it would cost to do a standalone facility. I think it's important to look at the timeline here. And to that point, as part of the School Capital Construction Committee, a process in 2002, the Halifax Regional School Board requested a new school within the riding boundaries of Halifax Citadel. The proposed school is designed to accommodate 700 grade primary to 7 students and will replace 4 aging schools in the region. Halifax South Elementary School is one of 12 new schools, and those schools were approved in 2003. It is now 2006. At the same time, 45 other schools were approved for additions and renovations. The new $10 million school is due to open in September of 2009, and at that time, the 4 existing buildings will revert back to the municipality, who will then determine how to best utilize them in the interest of the communities. In Resolution 21, the Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel has said that consolidating 4 older and smaller schools into one larger institution was a move to, quote, big box schools, and he suggested that this is a bad move. Larger schools provide significant opportunities for students. They offer greater diversity. They offer opportunities for sports and academic challenges that might not be feasible in a smaller school. And at the high school level, it's much more cost-effective with your critical mass to put in high-grade lab technology services and staffing. It is not uncommon in small high schools to have a teacher with a science background delivering physics, chemistry, Science 10, and perhaps even math or phys ed. That critical mass is important at whatever grade level. The resolution that the minister has put forward requests that the government impose a 2-year moratorium. But let me explain. The department and the province do not close schools. School boards identify schools that are not operating at sufficient capacity, that cannot operate efficiently, and recommend them for review and possible permanent closures. School boards do not take the closing of schools lightly. It is a last resort, but sometimes it is a necessary one. It is intended to ensure that communities are aware of what school boards are considering for permanent closure, to give them a chance to appear at public meetings, to provide time for the board and the communities to ponder the opinions that were shared at these public forums, to provide time for the communities to comment on the report, and to make a recommendation. That process would have been followed. When a school closes, it does revert back to the municipality. And the building, as I said, could be something of value to the municipal development in that area. Last spring, my predecessor, the Honourable Member for Truro Bible Hill and then Education Minister, asked the school boards who were reviewing some school permanent closures to suspend those deliberations. And this suspension was for school boards which were already reviewing schools for possible closure. It was not retroactive. He has put into place a 2-member committee that would meet with school board members and their staff and with school communities to determine if Education Act regulations related to school closures need to be reviewed. The review is being conducted by credible people: Norma Kennedy, the former chair of Halifax County Bedford District School Board and the Halifax Regional School Board, and Mike McDougall, former principal of Judith Crednish Consolidated School. It will focus on the steps outlined in the Education Act and the regulations for school review studies, and the team will also consider how alternate uses of schools might be factored in. And with the calling of the June 13th provincial election, the review was postponed until fall, and it will resume in the fall, and I am expecting that there will be a report that will be tabled early in 2007. And regardless of whatever the recommendation is from that committee, whether it's recommending status quo or changes to the legislation, the impact will be the same. No public schools will close in this province, with the notable exception of one in Cape Breton that has been closed because of safety reasons, before June of 2008. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair will now recognize the honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I'm certainly pleased to rise today and speak on resolution number 21. Certainly, while this resolution is very specific, pertaining to Halifax Citadel and the closure of 4 small elementary schools, and of course to build one 700-person school at a cost of $10 million. And while certainly there are many concerns that can be raised around the size of this particular school and the closure of 4 community-based, and that is inner-city communities that do have a culture, a tradition, and certainly a practice in close association with the schools of those areas. I do want to go beyond those bounds a little bit and talk about small schools, rural schools in general in the province, because I think certainly the time has come to put our children and the education of our children, in a stronger and position here in the province. And we have been seeing school closures right across the province. Certainly for I think of the past 7 or 8 years, and in particular the past 3 years. As education critic, I've noted certainly a number from Sydney to Yarmouth, from Bridgewater to Amherst, that have been closed. And on some of those occasions, it was a matter of almost looking for reasons to close them, as opposed to what is the raison d'etre? What are the strong reasons why we should continue to hold on to those small community schools? Now, in some other provinces, and I do want to draw our attention here to what has happened in a few of the other provinces that perhaps can give us a little bit of guidance and shed a bit of light on this particular topic. In Quebec, for example, in January of 2003, a report from the Working Group on Maintaining Village and Small Schools was presented to the Quebec provincial government. And the working group was co-chaired by the President of the Federation of School Boards and the President of Rural Solidarity of Quebec. The provincial government responded to the report by introducing a policy to save village schools, to save, for example, what in our case here would be rural schools, and in this case in particular pertaining to Halifax Citadel would be small inner city schools, declaring that having a school is a strong symbol for the development and vitality of rural communities, small communities, and inner city communities. And also the government developed a program that included additional funding to ensure that small schools were able to hire well-qualified teachers and to ensure that the buildings were maintained. So Quebec went the other way. They found reasons to continue to support the small school and then went about putting in place a policy and a program whereby there was sufficient funding and support services were put in place. As well, school boards were to put in place policies requiring public consultation on school closures and requiring consultation between school districts and municipalities when a school is considered for closure, with the intention of maintaining schools in single school communities. In Newfoundland, and I like this whole concept and the whole philosophy that emanates from just three simple words or a phrase that they use. They recognize the critical role of small schools, rural schools, and they put in place a designation for small but necessary schools. Small but necessary schools. And in this case here, in Halifax Citadel, we may have 4 inner city communities that, in fact, the small school may add to the total vibrancy of that community, and in fact can perhaps even be a spark for renewal. And so I think that's the case that is being made here. Just this afternoon, I decided to make a quick call to a friend who's done a lot of consulting work for the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board, and he constantly reads research, and that's a friend by the name of Barry Corbin. And he says that now in many of the jurisdictions across the United States, they have a policy whereby they will not build a school to house more than 400 elementary students. And there is all kinds of research that could be brought in here to provide strong documentation for that. Continuing with the theme of Saskatchewan, the province provides a grant to remote small schools, which include an enrollment factor and a location factor for funding purposes. And so that's, again, making a case for the rural school. And recently in British Columbia, once again, there was the ministry in 2002, they set up a task force to look at small schools and in particular rural schools. And again, the task force came back with, again, that wonderful statement that we've heard from many parents, many people who have a strong investment in school life. And they said, you know, the public schools are the heart of the community. Okay, in this case here, if we have 4 schools with 4 inner communities within Citadel, then that surely is a real strength. And in particular, again, they came up with the perspective that the rural school in particular represents more than a place for the children to be educated. In many ways, it also represents the right to preserve a rural culture and a viable economic development plan. So I think here in the province of Nova Scotia, this is a great opportunity through this review committee to, I think, set in progress a whole new approach to why we need small schools within our cities, within our small towns, and in particular rural Nova Scotia. I think it's an opportunity to breathe some new life, whether it becomes, again, the community center for many of our communities. And I think that's the kind of thinking that we need to approach here. Just before the election, the Liberal caucus was certainly in favor of a moratorium on school closures. And I think in this case here in Halifax, I don't think the consultation process has been as wide and as intense as is necessary to I think, come up with what is the best future for these 4 elementary schools and the process and the final decision on what should be done with these schools. In March 2006, former Minister of Education asked for a review of legislation covering the process for considering school closures in Nova Scotia. And we firmly believe that this review must seek advice from school board members, administrators, and the public to find the best possible solution. And as the new Minister of Education has outlined, this certainly task force is now in place, and I think the widest consultation process must certainly be there. We also called for the implementation of the Hogg Report, which was funded by the Government of Nova Scotia and completed almost 2 years ago, and the formula for all schools can provide a solution to school closures, as well as many other issues within the school system. And once again, the driving force behind the Hogg Report was that we would not be treating, every district, every school board, and every area in a cookie cutter fashion. That we would be accounting for the unique cultural elements that are at play in all of our communities. And if the Hogg Report is truly to be implemented, it shouldn't take longer than 3 years. And I think this, again, is another avenue now that we have at our disposal here in the province to certainly review the appropriate size of school and what schools should and should not be closed. And just in closing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to say that while we have summer recess going on in the province, there should be no recess and no summer break from finding the best solutions for our education system, as the learning capabilities of our children should be of the highest priority for the House of Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. The chair will now recognize the honourable member from Kimberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and welcome to the chair, and congratulations on your selection. I'd like to take a few moments of the House time this afternoon to review this very important issue of small school closures. Small school. Important fact that the minister seems to have passed by. On the way of compliments, I'd like to begin by complimenting my new colleague from Halifax Citadel for bringing forward this important issue, an important issue where neighborhood schools, where particularly in your community, the parents feel they have not been part of the loop. That is a key element in this. And on the topic of compliments, I think we should look at the fact that we had a minister previously who took the initiative in the middle of the shambles that we were facing around this province, whether it was in Wentworth or River Hibbert, whether it was in Morion or whether it was in Clark's Harbour, whether it was in Shatford Memorial. He interceded and said, there's going to be a stop to this. I'm going to have the whole process reviewed, because that minister knew, based upon the advice that he was receiving, that the process was flawed. And I'm looking forward to the committee when it reports back. I'm sure, knowing Mrs. Kennedy personally and her years on the school board, I'm sure that there will be an extensive report on the process of how schools should be closed, if they indeed need to be closed across this province. And the topic of compliments, too, I want to pass on a compliment to the MLA for the beautiful Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley. Now, many times in this House, that member has stood in his place, probably a lot more passionately when he was on this side than when he sits now over there. But the MLA from Colchester, beautiful Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley, I want you to know that he stood in Upper Musquodoboit School. He stood in Upper Musquodoboit School surrounded by parents, and he clearly made the case that that small elementary school should remain open. And his input that night and the fact that he had his say as an MLA was important. He wasn't grandstanding, although he does that on occasion in here once in a while. In fact, I've taken a few lessons from him over the years. He was making his point on behalf of his community. He was listened to, and it was important that he said at that time some of the information that was forthcoming there was just not correct. And also at that meeting, I had the opportunity to see the Reverend Gary Burrell in operation. Reverend Burrell, of course, has a very prominent volunteer role in the community, showed great initiative in collecting the correct information to pass on to the school board. And the Reverend Burrell, in fact, must have had a conversation with me later that evening, because later on, within the next number of months, he decided to make the wise choice of offering for the NDP, and he did exceptionally well. So I want to thank Gary Burrell for showing his initiative. But away from the compliments, if I may, because the process that I've endured when it comes to small school closures is flawed. And I can give you a number of examples in that case. I want to turn particularly to the community of Hubbards. Shatford Memorial, an older school that's crucial to that wonderful community in the South Shore of Nova Scotia. But when the HRSB, the Halifax Regional School Board, collected their information and were going to make their decision based upon what they had collected, many of that information was just incorrect, particularly not just the enrollment statistics, Mr. Speaker, but those other numbers, economic development, new businesses moving into the community. And that's the flawed part of the argument when it comes to the school boards. They look strictly at enrollment statistics. They look strictly at how many young children are coming along. They don't look at other things that are happening in the community. And I think one of the best examples of that was in Upper Musquodoboit, when the school board members all were there at the front, and a particular man stood in his place and informed them that he was interested and looks forward to opening a gold mine in that community, a real gold mine. That, after all, is a wonderful initiative of economic development in rural Nova Scotia. And the school board members said, "What gold mine?" Now, here they are, they've done their research, but the research has to be delivered by people such as Reverend Burrell. It has to be delivered by volunteers in the community. A better example that I can give to the House is that when we visited the riding of Glace Bay and had the opportunity to go out to Morion, a beautiful seaside community, and see their school, the information that that school board collected was flawed again. In fact, a mother took the initiative to knock on every door, proving to the board that they had the wrong number of potential primary students who would be coming to the school. That mother took her own time and went door to door in the community and got the correct information. Because she got the correct information and then took it to the public meeting and pointed out to the board, "You don't have your facts right." Again, that board said, "Oh, we've made a mistake. This is a school that should continue to remain open." But I heard the minister stand in her place earlier and read from a prepared text, as she's supposed to do in this place. And I want to point out to her this very simple theory. Big ain't better when it comes to schools. And excuse my grammar, but I'm going to put it that way, Mr. Speaker. Big ain't better. Now, every once a year, we are subjected to this Ames report, this fabulous Ames report. Mr. Sirtwell gets himself all kinds of cheap publicity when he goes around and rates the high schools in this province. And I want to point out that the top high school he always rates is one of the smallest high schools in the province. So the argument that the minister brought forward before when she spoke from her prepared statement, saying that that teacher has to teach multiple disciplines and that he or she could be the phys ed teacher and the physics teacher and the chemistry teacher. A teacher is a teacher. And in many of those small schools, let me tell you, the children are receiving a wonderful education. That particular school, big, is not necessarily better. That's important for all of us to continue to maintain. That's at the high school level. But I want to point out to the minister and to the members opposite and to the members present, let's look at elementary schools. Elementary schools, and I can give you two prominent examples. In Timberley Prospect, we have an elementary school, primary to grade 5, that attend Beachville Lakeside Timberley School. They have over 800 students that attend BLT Elementary. And I want you to know, when you go into that school at the first of the day, it's a bus stop glorified traffic director's problem. Now, I've seen the principal out there some mornings, along with parent volunteers, making sure that the kids are dropped off in the right place, the school buses can move out at the right time. Because of the growth in the community, the decision was made that the elementary school would be built next to the junior high school, and now the junior high school and the elementary school are now called Beachville Lakeside Timberley Elementary School. 800 students. I mean, the challenges that the principals, the vice principals, and the teachers have in that school continue to be faced each and every day. And I've talked to many of them personally, and many of them wish that they were in a smaller school. Not that there's a quality of education problem there, but you face a whole new set of challenges at BLT Elementary. And BLT, of course, is also the school of Paula Gallant, the tragic death of Miss Gallant and her unfortunate murder and the fact that it's still not solved. I've been in Paula's class, her grade 3 class, and let me tell you, there's something magical happens in there. The magic that happens between a small school or a big school still comes down to what the teacher and the students are doing. So I can go from 800 students in an elementary school to a small school, again, a primary to 5, in the rural community of Terrence Bay. In fact, members opposite have heard me speak of Terrence Bay many times. I go to their school on every occasion possible. It's not hard to forget their names because most of them are Slan whites, of course. There might be a Harry or two in there, but that family of schools and that family of feeling that happens in Terrence Bay Elementary happens because of the size of the school. 65, 67 students in that school. But Terrence Bay Elementary School is more than just a school. It's a place where the seniors drop in. Seniors come into that school to assist teachers. They come in at various times during the year for not just social events, but to speak to the students. It's a special school because of its size. It's also a special school because that school is the meeting place in that community. That's something crucial we all have to remember. You close a small school, you're not just closing the school, you're closing the community's heart and the center of it socially, in some cases athletically, and of course, surely scholastically. The best example that it can be brought to mind, aside from Terrence Bay, is in the beautiful community of Clark's Harbor. I had the opportunity to visit Clark's Harbor along with my friend from Cape Breton Center, at which time we met with parents and they were facing again the closure of a small school. Now, Clark's Harbor, as you well know, Mr. Speaker, is a wonderful, unique community. They have a sense of community in Clark's Harbor. And it revolves around not just their ball field and their famous ball players that come out of that great community. It revolves around their school. Yes, the church is an important part of the community. Yes, the fire hall is an important part of the community. But the school is where it happens. The school in Clark's Harbor, the school in Terrence Bay, the school in Wentworth. All of those schools are more than just buildings. And we are tampering with the very fabric of small towns, small villages and hamlets by removing their schools from them. Putting students on school buses and traveling down the road for so many kilometers does not assure them a better education, particularly at the elementary age level. Now, I will admit that in high school, it is necessary in some cases. Growth areas such as ours that I represent in Timberley Prospect, the member from Chester St. Margaret's, we are going to celebrate the opening of the new Sir John A. Macdonald High School. And students will be bused a long distance to come to this new high school, which is well received in our community. But they are high school students. They are high school students. They're not elementary students who are going to travel great distances. So I want to point out the most eventful thing of closing the school was when we were in Upper Musquodoboit. In fact, we were in Upper Musquodoboit early, and I don't know whether the MLA from Colchester Musquodoboit Valley wasn't aware of it, because he's at every event, of course, but he didn't take the magical bus tour that they put us on. They put us on the magical bus tour of the back roads of that community and then pointed out how far we would have to go when Upper Musquodoboit was closed. The acting chair, I believe that was her title at the time, of the Halifax Regional School Board, she was so, shall I say this, physically upset with not just the distance and the turning of the buses and, of course, the poor conditions of the road, she became physically ill. She became physically ill. When she stepped off the bus, she did have something else to emit, and it wasn't something that I wanted to clean up. But there was an example, Mr. Speaker, of when it comes to an elementary school putting those little children on those distances, just an unacceptable way to handle the issue. And I want finally to remind the Minister of Education that perhaps it would be appropriate for her to talk to some of her cabinet members, some of the various other members of the cabinet, because I think it would be appropriate for her to know the thoughts of the member who's the Minister of Justice, for her to know what other members in Cumberland County think of the possibility of closing the Wentworth School, closing the River Hibbert School, all very controversial decisions. The cookie cutter does not work here. One size does not fit all. But when it comes to small schools, small elementary schools, they must remain open across this province at all costs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The chair will now recognize the Honourable the Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and congratulations to you, Mr. Speaker. You've served this House in the capacity as Speaker and Deputy Speaker in the past, and I know you will preside over this old establishment with a lot of class and dignity. Mr. Speaker, I want to as well thank the Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel for bringing this resolution forward this afternoon. This is a very important subject. It's near and dear to the hearts of many, many Nova Scotians. And while the province, without question, is reviewing the school review process that's contained in the Education Act, I want to point out that the government is doing that to ensure that it continues to meet the needs of our community, the department, and school boards. And I think the key here is the community and the community needs. And I want to commend the former Minister of Education, the Honourable Member for Truro Bible Hill, because through his leadership and direction, this government took a very important step. It did listen. It listened to all members in this chamber, but especially I do believe that the Honourable Member for Cumberland South and other members in our caucus put forward some very compelling reasons why the whole school review process must be reviewed. And it's legislation. It's in the Education Act. And it's easy to stand here, if you will, from a riding that's out in rural Nova Scotia and look at things perhaps in a context that may be, from an urban perspective, a little bit narrow and be perceived that way. But it doesn't matter where you live. The school can be, and in many, many cases is, the heart of the community. But in rural Nova Scotia, we don't have necessarily the same amenities, if you will, Mr. Speaker, as you know, representing Clare, that some of the more urbanized ridings have. But just the same, we have to point out that the urban areas have some concerns that may be very, very important to them that we perhaps don't have a full comprehension of. So I do commend the member for bringing the resolution forward, but in the same context, and in fact every bit as important, I think the Honourable Member and members of the NDP caucus should recognize that the Honourable Member for Truro Bible Hill, through his leadership, the step was taken to conduct the school review process, and it was an important step, and I want to commend my colleague from Truro Bible Hill. Now, Mr. Speaker, I had an opportunity through an invitation from the Honourable colleague for Cumberland South to attend a meeting up in River Hibbert, and the people in River Hibbert are very, very passionate about their school, and to the person, they are behind that school remaining open. And I know, we all know that because of our demographic, enrollments are declining, and it's very difficult. It's a challenge, but again, the folks in that community have spoken. They've spoken loud and clear, and the Honourable Member for Cumberland South has worked very, very hard. But during that meeting, I was struck by something that a member of the Chignecto Central Regional School Board said, and that was, to paraphrase, Mr. Speaker, that the professionals are telling us that the students would be better served in a larger school. And I think generally we recognize that there are so-called benefits, and as well there may be some drawbacks from moving to a bigger school. But a member of the teaching fraternity there raised a concern about just who the professionals are. Like, it's not the professionals at the River Hibbert School. It wasn't the professionals at the Upper Muscadava Consolidated Elementary School. The teachers will tell you that in the small settings, in those small schools, and I have a number of educators in this caucus, and there's a number of educators, I guess, in every caucus. And you know, from my very informal discussions with members on all sides of the House, I think we value and believe that there is benefits in some of the bigger schools, but just the same, there are benefits that may outweigh those perceived benefits in the little schools. So it's something that was needed. It's something that my government has taken a very bold step in, and it's something that we all should support. And if we do have concerns and issues, we have a consultation process that is a key element to this whole school review process. So again, I think we have some opportunities, and as well, I want to point out that the Premier of this province knows full well how valuable schools are to any community in Nova Scotia. So again, a bold step by the former Minister of Education and a bold step by the Premier in this government about this. Well, you know, there will be times when we have votes. There will be times when we don't have votes. This is going to be one of the times we're not going to have a vote. I'm very sorry to tell the honourable member, because the process has been opened up. And again, it's through the leadership of this side of the House, you know. And again, it was a bold step. It was a very important step that this government made. Now, I think we all see eye to eye on that if we really reach down. So, you know, there's no need to go out and recreate the wheel here. The minister, the current minister and the former minister are very, very supportive of reviewing the school review process contained in the Education Act. Now, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member for Timberley Prospect has been around this legislature for quite some time, and the honourable member and I, outside of politics, have thank you, Mr. Speaker, have engaged in some extracurricular activity, and for the most part, I will say that we usually, what kind of extracurricular activity? Well, let me say that during the conclusion of one hockey tournament, a very close game, the honourable member was kind enough to come over, holding what appeared to be a tray with a refreshment on it, Mr. Speaker, and he brought the refreshment into my team's dressing room, and not only did he leave the refreshment, he left the tray, and the tray was not as popular as the refreshment. The tray happened to be one of the honourable member's lawn election signs, but I still have that in a very not so prominent place in my house. Well, I'll tell the honourable members later where it is, but it's still in a place that is quite obscure. But nonetheless, members of the Taylor household are very aware of that sign and where it is, and some close friends. But just the same, I want to thank the honourable member for going to Upper Muscadava that evening and helping us and helping Reverend Gary Burrell, and who incidentally, as the honourable member acknowledged earlier, was the NDP candidate in Colchester Muscadava Valley during the last election. And I want to commend the Reverend for running a very dignified campaign, Mr. Speaker. But I was very pleased that in fact we had an opportunity to perhaps once again win the riding. And I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank all members. Thank you.
Order, please. The time allotted for debate on Resolution 21 has now expired. The official opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I call resolution number 23.
Resolution number 23. The honourable member for Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I'd like to refresh the members of the House the particular resolution number 23, and I'll read Whereas the lobster industry is the backbone of the fishing industry and the main economic engine that drives the economy in many of our coastal communities in Nova Scotia, and whereas landings of lobsters are valued at over $300 million and account for almost half of the value of fish landed in Nova Scotia, and whereas issues surrounding the marking of soft-shell lobsters require government leadership and immediate industry consultation, therefore it be resolved that the Minister of Fisheries immediately strike a committee to meet with stakeholders in southwest Nova Scotia to discuss the soft-shell lobster issue and come up with a meaningful recommendations for the industry before the next lobster season is upon us. Mr. Chairman, I want to echo again the privilege and the honor to take my place in this seat in this particular House. Mr. Speaker, I thank you again, and first of all, I'd like to point out to all the members of this House that there is a number of likeness or similarities between a lobster and politicians. First, both need to have a tough skin or a shell, and at times, both can feel trapped if we do not go in the right direction. And most more importantly, and if we are not careful, both politicians and lobsters can find themselves in hot water.
Good analogy.
Mr. Speaker, the need for consultation to address this issue surrounding soft-shell lobsters is very important. And I'd like to suggest the opening of the District 33 and District 34 lobster seasons on the last Monday in each November is a great sight to see. The large processors in southwest Nova Scotia talk about their humble beginnings from a simple wheelbarrow in the saltfish business. The largest lobster processors in Nova Scotia tell of their humble beginning from the sales of the back of a half-ton truck. My grandfather fished and navigated the waters off Nova Scotia from Cape Breton to the U.S. Marine or Maine border with nothing more than a compass, a watch, and a sounding lead. And Mr. Speaker, yesterday I was corrected by using a prop, but I'm going to ask you to use your imagination because there's nothing more powerful than your imagination. And I simply can't see or imagine that this industry is going to be lost or in jeopardy simply because we do not take action. And my grandfather traveled this coast with nothing more than a simple lid. And I ask you to use your imagination and put the lid overboard. The simple depth of that water was indicated, knowing how close they were to certain shoals. By simply putting a grease in a cavity in that lid, they simply realized that the bottom was either gravel, sandy, muddy, or rocky. That simple beginning of Nova Scotia fisheries lobster industry is known to all residents across Nova Scotia in many coastal communities. And this particular product is known worldwide. Today, the fishing industry has evolved from the Cape St. Long boat that's made of wood to fiberglass. Their hydraulics, powerful engines, and the high-tech GPS global plotters. Many vessels have as good communications and technology, if not more equipment, than some of the 747s that are flying over our heads as we speak. Mr. Speaker, one of my fishing friends could put an anchor, a string of long-line gear, or a lobster trap in this harbor if you mark the spot, and they can do this with blind visibility. They can do this in zero visibility. You can literally board the windows up of their cabins, and tomorrow morning, Mr. Speaker, if you mark the X, given this enough time, they can put that particular gear in that spot. This is how far this industry has evolved in a few hundred years. However, Mr. Speaker, the market strategy has not evolved along with this particular lobster industry. Each year, in southwest Nova Scotia, we export millions of pounds worth of dollars worth of this product to other provinces. The lobster fleet is very capable of landing high volumes of lobster in days or even 72 hours. Our lobster fleet fishes farther afield. Our climate is changing, and some of these lobsters molt at a different time in our seasons. And I've been instructed to inform you, Mr. Speaker, that the fishermen on the Maine coast have indicated that the molt this particular season is earlier, which indications show that we'll have a strong, healthier lobster in the upcoming November fisheries. And I just want to point out that this molting process goes on each year on an annually basis. And if you look at our climate, and you can suggest that there is some changes here, we look at our polar ice caps, we look at the polar bears and their loss of habitat, and this is all taking place in our environment. And one of the suggestions is that this may be an environmental issue of dealing with lobsters that are molting closer to the beginning of this season. And I strongly suggest to the members that they may want to pay attention to this particular point, because this is something that needs to be addressed in consulting with our fishing industry. The fishing industry has built a good number of lobster holding facilities across this province. Many can be found in southwest Nova Scotia. Shelburne County is the home of most of these facilities. This fishing industry is the lifeline of our community. The lobster industry employs thousands of Nova Scotians each year. Fishermen, crew members have to make a profit. Dealers, lobster buyers have to make a profit. Large processors, they also need to make a profit. And the consumer demands a quality product at a reasonable price. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia government needs to take a proactive approach to address some of the concerns around marketing of soft-shell lobsters. The industry wants to sit down, come up with recommendations to have in place for the upcoming fall lobster season. The Nova Scotia government should facilitate and hold such meetings in southwest Nova Scotia. And before I conclude, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, the lobster industry is a major export of the Nova Scotia economy. Our coastal communities want this issue addressed. Mr. Speaker, let's show the public that there is a difference between a politician and a lobster, because surely this government will choose the right direction and not find themselves in hot water.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the Honourable the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too would like to congratulate you on your position of being appointed Deputy Speaker. As my colleague from Muscadabbit, Colchester Muscadabbit has said, you've been the Deputy Speaker and Speaker, so congratulations on that appointment. And also, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member from Shelburne for bringing this concern to the floor of the Legislature for debate tonight. I know the member has a very keen interest in the issue of soft shell, not only as a fisheries critic, but as a resident of one of the most lucrative lobster areas, southwest Nova Scotia. And I also understand that the member in a previous life was a lobster fisherman, maybe still is. Mr. Speaker, the lobster industry in Nova Scotia is a major contributor to the provincial economy and the largest component to Nova Scotia seafoods exports, totaling over $1 billion annually. Nova Scotia lobster is known internationally for its great taste. We have successfully reached many markets around the world because of that quality. In 2005, the Nova Scotia lobster industry landed $338 million worth of lobster in the province. The southwest area of the province is known as the lobster capital because of a large majority of landies come from that area. But I would have to say that after this year's season on the Eastern Shore, we're running a close second. I would think. No question, the seafood industry and the lobster industry is the lifeblood of the economy of West Nova Scotia. And as we know, Mr. Speaker, thousands of people are employed directly and indirectly by the lobster industry. We also know the vast majority of lobster caught in Nova Scotia is very high quality. The current fishery has been structured, in part, to avoid landing lobsters during the molting period. This allows lobsters to fully recover from the molt before the fishery opens in the fall. We are also aware of the concerns over the past few years regarding lobster quality. These concerns are due to periodic increases in the landings of soft shell in some areas. Although healthy, these lobsters contain less meat and in many cases are not suitable for shipping. There are, however, places in the market for these lobsters, such as processed lobster products. Proper grading and handling of lobsters are ways the industry is using to mitigate this problem when it occurs. Current thinking attributes the periodic increases of soft shell landings to changes in molt timing probably due to environmental factors. A delay in this natural process results in a small portion of lobster population to not be fully recovered from the molt and full of meat in a time for the fishing season. Other theories to explain this problem have also been discussed. While the government takes this issue seriously, I want to emphasize that the Nova Scotia lobster industry has a solid reputation and provides top quality lobsters to domestic and the international marketplace. And Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia Fisheries and Aquaculture has been engaged in addressing this issue for several years.
Good ministers.
We are working with the industry, we are working with DFO, and we are working with other stakeholders to better understand the nature and the extent of the problem in order to develop appropriate solutions. As part of these efforts, Nova Scotia Fisheries and Aquaculture has made financial contributions to the Joint Industry Government Molt Monitoring Program. For example, Mr. Speaker, $10,000 was provided in 2004, $58,000 in 2005, and again this spring in 2006 there was $20,000. In addition, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia Fisheries and Aquaculture's budget, which is under review, has allocated $50,000 to province-wide lobster research initiatives. As well, Fisheries and Aquaculture will participate in research efforts again in 2006 and has set aside a budget allocation for long-term partnerships with these groups.
Even got a separate minister now. It's so important, thanks to the Premier. New minister. Yes, sir.
And in addition, Mr. Speaker, financial contribution staff are active participants in several committees that are already in place. Mr. Speaker, these include the Lobster Advisory Committees, the Lobster Sciences Committees, and the LFA 3334 Lobster Action Committee. Other participants include fishermen, buyers, processors, DFO managers, and scientists, the Atlantic Veterinarian College, the Lobster Science Center, fishermen, and the Science Research Center. I want to assure the honourable member that all stakeholders are fully committed to addressing this issue and ensuring that the Nova Scotia lobster industry continues to enjoy its reputation for a top-quality product. As well, Mr. Speaker, the Nova Scotia government is also committed to using its resources to address any marketing solutions that may be identified. I want the member to know that the government remains committed to open to working with industry to explore strategies to resolve the concerns around this issue. Because there are a number of partnerships already in place at several levels, there is no need at this time for a new committee. The government will continue to work with the stakeholders in Southwest Nova, as well as all the stakeholders in the province of Nova Scotia. I want to thank the member for bringing this resolution forward and giving me the opportunity to discuss this very important issue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The chair will now recognize the honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I start, I would like to draw your attention to the west gallery. A friend of mine and a man very knowledgeable of the fishing industry, who's the head of the Nova Scotia Fish Packers Association, Mr. Denny Morrow. I'd like for the host to give him a warm welcome. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise and participate in the debate on resolution number 23. It reads, "Be it resolved that the Minister of Fisheries immediately strike a committee to meet with the stakeholders in Southwest Nova to discuss the soft-shell lobster issue come up with meaningful recommendations for the industry before the next lobster fishing season is upon us." Mr. Speaker, without a doubt, a healthy world first-class lobster industry in Nova Scotia is vital to this whole province. The industry is the mainstay of many of our coastal communities, and we must do all we can to keep it that way. Mr. Speaker, each year, $300 to $400 million worth of lobsters are landed by about 3,400 lobster license holders in this province, mostly in Southwest and West Nova Scotia. We are very fortunate to have a diversified fishery in our province, but lobster is by far the most valuable sector that we have. While Nova Scotia lobsters are sold worldwide, the United States is our most important customer. Access to this market must be protected. The economies of a vast area of Nova Scotia depend on a healthy lobster fishery and a healthy market. Mr. Speaker, earlier this year, the former Minister of Fisheries wrote a letter to the editor expressing concern about illegal lobsters being sold in this province. While there is no question that this is important, the issue we are debating is equally important. Mr. Speaker, it's an issue which impacts our province's reputation as a world-class leader when it comes to the export of lobsters around this world. It's an issue that requires addressing. It's an issue that requires leadership to get it started. I believe it is incumbent upon the Minister of Fisheries to show some leadership and to provide some direction on this issue before it's too late to correct it at all. Mr. Speaker, shedders or soft-shell lobsters have always been one sector of the lobster market in the United States. It's nothing new to them. Shedders or soft-shell lobsters have been in that market for many years, but they are always separated from the hard-shell lobsters. Over the past 4 years, the landing rate of shedders has increased in Nova Scotia waters, even during the winter months, which is very, very unusual. The challenge, however, is quality for our greatest markets. The Canadian lobster is known globally as having top-quality hard-shelled lobsters, not soft-shelled mixed with them. Mr. Speaker, this reputation is in jeopardy. However, it's in jeopardy because the lobster buyers sell a mix of both hard-shell and softly shelled lobsters, and not to all their blame. Something needs to be done to correct this. Mr. Speaker, there are essentially three approaches a committee could look at. They could first review the role of the lobster buyer processor on how they handle this lobster. Soft-shell lobsters and hard-shell lobsters could be separated at a buying station, not letting the soft-shell lobster to get into the hard-shell market. This would still allow the soft-shell lobster to be sold in the traditional United States market without jeopardizing our world-class reputation for our hard-shell lobster. Mr. Speaker, fishermen could separate the soft-shell lobster and the hard-shell lobster to the point of catch. This recommendation may sound simple, but it's not, because winter weather conditions make this task aboard of a boat very difficult. Fishermen could return the shedders to the water, not including these lobsters as part of their landed catch. This would happen if lobster buyers refused to purchase shedders in the first place. it would appear that fishermen, buyers, processors need to play the largest role in this solution. They must be part of the solution, or they will continue to be part of the problem. Mr. Speaker, leadership on the part of this minister and this government is needed. The minister must play a leadership role, educating fish buyers, lobster shippers, fishermen, and the general public. It is obvious that this problem cannot be allowed to continue. Our treasured world-class reputation is at risk, so the minister must act, and act now. The lobster industry is far too important for us to allow it to be jeopardized by those who are careless with their actions. We must all work together to protect the #1 fishery in this province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, the times and the climate in our ocean are changing. If we don't work to change with it, we may be very sorry for that in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.
The chair now recognizes the Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I too want to congratulate the Speaker on sitting in the chair. Et je me remercie en France aussi d'avoir un sous-président qui peut faire des débats en français, que je pense que moi, le député de Richmond ou quelqu'un d'autre, on pourrait faire des débats en français juste sans faire de la traduction. But again, I will do some translating here is to thank and welcome the Speaker that we might be able to do some debates in French with the member for Richmond and other members in the House, and not having to actually translate on the fly, because sometimes it takes a fair amount of time. Donc, bienvenue, et j'espère le mieux qui va se passer là. I want to also welcome the member for Shelburne, the new member for Shelburne, for joining us in the House. The member and I have been acquaintances for quite some time, and quite honestly, not so long ago, he really was one of my bosses. So it's quite interesting to see how life changes and how friends come back in different ways. And I do want to commend him for his commitment to the fishery, because the member opposite has spoken on a number of occasions as his capacity as warden for the municipality of Barrington, as member of the Southwest Shore RDA, and other organizations that the member did sit on in his previous life. So I do welcome to this House and thank him for bringing these issues forward. Also, being a neighboring riding, that Argyll and Shelburne share a common ground and a common area of Charlesville. The line's right there. And I got to say that I think I have two of his siblings living in my riding. His sister lives in East Pubnico, and his brother Chum lives over on the west side. So very happy to have part of his family in my riding. I don't know if they voted for me, but I'm kind of hoping. It's hard to say. It's hard to say.
You know what he said? The Speaker said, he said if he lived in Argyll, he'd have voted for you.
There you go. Well, I'm glad to hear the Speaker that kind of ringing endorsement. Unfortunately, that's not our discussion for this evening. It would be a very interesting discussion, though, I think, if we went down that road, Mr. Speaker. But I will endeavor to stay on track to the issue at hand, which is the soft-shelled lobster issue in Southwest. Being the lobster fishery is by far the leading industry in Southwest, the #1 industry, and I wonder at times, and we've had long discussions at times, what would Southwest Nova Scotia look like without lobster? You know, what would the folks be doing? Would the folks still be there? And I got to say that they wouldn't. It has been a tremendous economic driver and a tremendous opportunity for thousands of people for a very long time. The member opposite talked about his heritage and his connection to the fishery. Of course, I do want to also mention that Beliveau is another Acadian name, so it's good to have another Acadian in the house. We'll teach him some French. I know he's got some scratchy French, but probably better to another establishment other than this house, the whole floor of this house. But my grandfather too was a fisherman who fished swordfish and another species from the end of George's Bank to the Grand Banks for a very long time, till he passed away at an early age of 48, some 50-odd years ago. But tremendous grandfather, and I wish I would have had the opportunity to meet him and understand his passion for the sea. Because ultimately, in those days, they didn't have GPS, and they sure as heck didn't have radar, and they were true fishermen, true master mariners. And not to say that today's fishermen aren't they, but they are a different breed, and the technologies that they have allow them to do the fishery somewhat differently and somewhat more dramatically. Knocking on doors over the last number of months gave us an opportunity to talk to fishermen, talk to fishing families, and just talk to communities that are so dependent on this fishery. And whether you're in lower East Pubnico, or whether you're in Wedgeport or lower West Pubnico, and talking about the fishery, you hear different solutions or different reasons of why the fishery is A, not doing so well, or why we're seeing the advent of soft-shell lobsters. And I think we still have the fishery well in hand with the community involvement, with the folks that dedicate an awful lot of time discussing these issues and coming up with solutions. And I want to thank Denny for being here. He will be discussing another fishery issue, but I'm glad he's here in the House to participate in this debate. And I want to thank him and all the Fish Packers Association for their constant eye on the fishery and their constant information flow to government, making sure that we understand what's happening on the ground. I want to thank people like Ashton Spinney from the District 34 Advisory Committee, the LFA, people like Craig Prouty, and I just talk about people on the wharf like Jeff Edgar and people like that continually call me and bring their concerns to us to say, here's what we're seeing. The product itself, lobster is a leading seafood product across the world. Nova Scotia lobster is number one by far. The concerns over the last number of years can be tracked to a number of factors. Some of it, as outlined by the member, of climatic change, warmer waters, different molting times, do cause lobsters to molt late and of course have soft shells. But I also think that it really has to do with the concentration of fishery and where the concentration is happening. If you look 10 years ago or 15 years ago at the concentration of the fishery and where it was, there were a lot of inshore boats, Lobster Bay, a little to the eastward where the honourable member fished for many years. And as the new fishery came in, as the new fishermen were buying rigs and moving on, they were moving, of course, further to the westward, going further offshore, and some things that we hadn't seen in the past. And I think with that effort, we've seen more soft-shell lobsters. Bigger lobsters, of course, that's another issue, of whether or not we should be leaving the large lobsters, the jumbos, in the water or not. I've got a whole bunch of different responses from different fishermen if you ask them that question. But ultimately, as you're looking at the effort, you're also looking at the money invested in this fishery. If you look at a new fisherman, the new fisherman would probably be out somewhere close to $1 million to buy that rig, to buy that license, to buy the equipment in order to go fishing. And what they're finding is that as they enter this fishery, the inshore is pretty much taken up by the established fishermen. That's where they're fishing. So they have to go west. It's this funny thing where we talk about going west and going out west to work in Calgary and things like that, but ultimately our new fishermen for those ones that are lucky enough to get into this fishery are finding themselves going to the western to catch their lobsters. The quantities have been okay in that area, but the product, the quality, has been one that is basically given us a bit of a black eye as those products are making it to market. And I think we, as a government, understand that and have brought this issue on numerous occasions to our federal partners, bring it to our community, because ultimately this issue can only be solved by a long-lasting partnership between industry, between levels of government, between communities. And everyone has to buy in, and everybody has to understand what this resource is doing. I think that the commitment here from this government has been understanding the importance of the fishery, and why I'm very happy to have a colleague sitting in this House, sitting around a cabinet table, whose responsibility is, again, fisheries and aquaculture. And I'm very happy that the honourable member from Guysborough, Sheet Harbour, has been lucky enough to fill that post, and I'm sure we'll be working very hard with Minister Hearn and all people to make sure the lobster fishery is supported and protected, and making sure that it is there for the long term for all communities in southwest Nova Scotia. So, Mr. Speaker, I would say that the concerns that we have in districts 33 and 34 are ones that are very serious, ones that probably don't have very simple solutions. Yet I think you have all the parties on board to make sure that we're there to protect it. But I would also ask the member opposite, does it mean having a big measure? Does it mean leaving some of these lobsters in? Does it mean maybe closing certain areas where we're seeing a more proliferation of these soft-shell lobsters? There are a lot of things that a lot of people are having to deal with in order to bring those suggestions to governments. I think we have a wonderful industry. It's very vibrant. It is full of people that I have tremendous respect for, and I think that they have it in their best interest too to protect the fishery as it stands. When all the big boats tie up to the wharf, when all the big boats tie up, my dad's a scallop fisherman. When he ties up his boat because it's getting too messy out there, it's getting too cold out there, that's when our lobster fishermen in southwest Nova Scotia go out fishing. And I give them tremendous kudos for working so hard to protect their families, to provide to them. And I got to say that this government and this House is on their side to ensure that we are going to protect and make sure the continuation of our families in southwest Nova Scotia. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would thank the member opposite for bringing this issue to the House of Assembly, to this legislature, because ultimately this is the place where so important things are discussed. Thank you.
The honourable member for Pictou East.
Mr. Speaker, the first thing that I would like to do is commend the former minister and the member for Argyle for filling in there, because some people, I guess, were a little bit, some members were a little bit short in their remarks, and I might have been caught a little off guard because I was in the balcony speaking with the very, very knowledgeable Denny Morrow, who has already been introduced to the House, and the head of the Nova Scotia Fish Packers Association. One of the things I would like to say, Mr. Speaker, first is how happy I am this afternoon to sort of ride shotgun for the very distinguished member for Shelburne. I was going to identify him with the municipality of Barrington so much because he has been such a part of that. It's my understanding that he has served as the warden for a good number of years, and if my memory serves me right, it was something in the order of 7 years, and that he was a councillor before that. More importantly, in being associated with this member is the fact that he has fished for 38 years, that this member has been fishing since he was 15 years old, for 38 years on the water. And that kind of experience is not duplicated on this side of the House or the other side of the House as well. What a great thing it is to have a fish harvester with that kind of experience on this side of the House. Now, addressing the issue, Mr. Speaker, the soft shell lobster issue, Mr. Speaker, the crux of the matter is that the shedding or the molting has been taking place later than it did in the past. And this is causing a severe problem. With 30%, Mr. Speaker, sometimes 30 to 40% of the lobster being landed in the first couple of weeks of the season, first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, 30% being soft shell. This is a severe problem. Now, hopefully, the meetings that we're looking at the minister taking the initiative to have will, in fact, address some of these situations. But looking at season change is a difficult thing, and we have a very substantial Christmas and New Year's market that has to be met. And some people would say the obvious solution is to change the season. Well, Mr. Speaker, I think there would be a lot of concern about that. Not only do we have a situation where the soft shell lobster is a problem for the first 2 or 3 weeks, many of the fish harvesters in southwestern Nova Scotia hold their lobsters until the first part of the new year. So we have those lobsters that were held also having 30 to 40% soft shell as well. So we almost have two situations. We have one that is the first couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and the other being when the held lobsters are in fact sold. Now, some people, and I think probably most, point to environmental factors. They point to water temperature change. And I think, Mr. Speaker, to use an example of how water temperature can really affect any number of species, probably about 8 or 9 years ago, there was a situation where silver hake had its best year class in the longest period of time, years and years and years, the very best year class. And 2 years before, a little blip of water, an area of water was identified off Newfoundland, and it took almost 2 years for that water to move down along the shelf, the Nova Scotia shelf, the Scotian shelf. And when that cold water got down along the shore, along the shelf. It came up and went into two of the basins, LaHave and Emerald Basin, two areas that the silver hake were found in tremendous numbers. And Mr. Speaker, in that situation, we ended up with that best year class to come along in years and years and years that had almost disappeared. That is what a couple of degrees can make in temperature. And I think we have to recognize that as one of the possible problems that we're dealing with. Another that is mentioned quite often in Maine and other areas of the eastern seaboard of the United States is related to diet. What is there for, and there are always changes, predator-prey changes that are taking place all of the time. And diet seems to be one of the things that is being put forward by some of the American fish harvesters, and it is being echoed to a certain degree, I believe, as well in southwestern Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I think that the most important thing that we can do right now to support this industry, which the minister mentioned was $338 million in landed value, that's not market value, in landed value, $338 million. I think what we should do is support the request for consultation as soon as possible with fish harvesters and buyers. And that the next ministers' conference be held in the municipality of Barrington rather than in Truro, with soft shell lobster as a primary agenda item. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the whole issue of lobster quality must be addressed, other issues other than the soft shell situation, and they should be on the agenda as well. Lobster is, in fact, the most important species, from Yarmouth right through to Bay St. Lawrence, the #1 species, and it spreads wealth out throughout the industry. There are some fisheries that only a few take the value from, but this is one that so many fish harvesters benefit from. And that quality is most important. In southwestern Nova Scotia, some of the lobster boats have become so large that to make them pay, they have to work around the clock at the first of the season. 24 hours, sometimes with 2 crews working these lobster boats. If there were some way, Mr. Speaker, that the harvesting could be at least slowed down at the first of the season, I think this would be a tremendous benefit. You can't have 30% of your harvest going to poor quality. And I understand that I'm running out of time, so I better speed up. I was trying to fill in the time period there by doing a little repetition, but I'll move very quickly now. We are looking at a number of issues. One is that the wooden crates that used to be used meant more handling of the lobster. Today, there is much less handling because the crates used to have different weights. Sometimes they varied from 22 to 28 pounds, and now with the plastic crates, they're 17 pounds, so there isn't the handling of them. The situation is that I think the minister should take this very, very seriously. When people start to sell their toys, it's one thing. If they're selling four-wheel vehicles or whatever, but when someone is losing a boat, it's another thing entirely. When people start to see dollar signs on the ceiling, it's one thing for the minister to sweat in this house for a little while, but it's another thing for people to wake up in the middle of the night seeing dollar signs on the ceiling with a cold sweat. I believe that the minister has to do something and do something fast, and this pittance of $20,000 to an industry that is worth $338 million is a far cry from what's needed. It's my understanding that twice that much is needed to do the work that has to be done in the science that is currently taking place. Mr. Speaker, we need $40,000 for that job.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if that was for me or Clary. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to stand in my place today to talk about this issue that we've been talking about. I want to whatever it is we're talking. The reality is that the lobster fishing industry is an important industry, not only in southwest Nova Scotia, but in all parts of Nova Scotia. The area that I represent has a large fishing community. Areas like Port Morion, Louisbourg, Manitou being known as the lobster capital of Nova Scotia and probably of the world as far as I'm concerned. But the whole issue, it would be a debate, but not from my point of view. Mr. Speaker, I guess what I really wanted to say is that the industry is important. It's important to Southwest Nova. It's important to Cape Breton Island. It's important to all parts of Nova Scotia. And we as a host have an obligation to work together to make sure that this industry survives and strives and delivers the kind of value that it does to our economy so that the people of the province of Nova Scotia have this benefit. The minister spoke of all the monies that are brought into the province of Nova Scotia by the landings. Mr. Speaker, this money and the jobs that are created by this are very important to every section of Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, we need to make sure that this lobster industry survives, continues to grow, and flourishes as we move forward. Mr. Speaker, there are many, many different issues that are involved with this lobster industry, and the ones that I would like to, I ran out of time, I'd like to talk a lot more, but I'm sorry I can't.
Order. We've reached the moment of interruption. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move that the House hours for tomorrow be that the House meet from 12 noon tomorrow to 8 p.m. tomorrow.
Motion is for the House to meet tomorrow from 12 noon to 8 p.m. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, nay. Nay. Motion is carried. The subjects for this evening's late debate was submitted by the Honourable Member, Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the government business for tomorrow will be obviously the daily routine, followed by supply, the Committee of the Whole House and Supply and the subcommittee, and of course, Mr. Speaker, following that, with any extra time, we'd be doing government bills for second reading.
Another riveting day ahead. We now move to late debate. The Honourable Member for Kings North has submitted the resolution. Therefore, be it resolved that the government has made significant steps forward through the Nova Scotia drinking water strategy and continues to look ahead to make a vital resource even better. The Honourable Member for Kings North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise and speak on this topic. I want to make an apology to the opposition members before I start, in that I'm booked to go see the Gore, Vice President Gore's film, An Inconvenient Truth, at 6:45. So I may have to pop out a bit early, but I will certainly read the members' remarks in response to what I have to say in Hansard, and we'll look forward to hearing what they have to say. So with that being said, that apology, I hope that the opposition members will give me that latitude I don't know if they've seen the film themselves, but I understand it's quite a worthwhile film. Yeah, I can tell you about it tomorrow. And I want to start with a big drink, Mr. Speaker, of nice, clear, crystal water. And I want to do that, Mr. Speaker, because we take I think, for granted the fact that we have this resource. I know, having grown up in Latin America, that it's not something that's taken for granted in various countries in the world, or various communities in the world, and even within our own country of Canada. We've seen in Ontario, Northern Ontario, that clean, safe drinking water is not something that everyone can enjoy. And so we don't want to take that for granted. And it's something that the Department of Environment and Labour considers to be a very serious matter, the quality and the quantity of drinking water for Nova Scotians. We take deliberate steps to provide Nova Scotians with water that is the cleanest achievable with the modern technology we have, Mr. Speaker, and provides security for public health. Because the health implications of unsafe drinking water are very severe. And that's why the department has worked diligently to define a strategy that ensures safe drinking water supplies for our citizens. These challenges of safe drinking water are great. They demand new and innovative approaches. And so the department is committed to a more scientific and pragmatic approach to policy creation and management.